Video games used to be imaginative, exciting, captivating, and addicting. When a new game would release, I remember spending hours poring through all the information related to the lore and spending additional time mastering the controls. I would get lost in the immersive worlds that had been crafted by development teams that deeply cared for their game. Games felt like a work of art that you had the privilege of playing. The way stories were written had depth to it that feels missing in the modern era. But what happened? Why do all games now just feel like uninspired copies of something else? Today on Poseidon Films, we explore the mystery as to why it feels like video games suck now. This isn't a fun video for us to make, but considering how much video games mean to us, we figured it was worth exploring in detail just what is going on in the gaming industry. If you love video games and want them to start to be good again, then press the like button. Video games haven't always been a multi-billion-dollar industry. There was a time they were considered a risky investment into a niche market. Most of the major gaming studios we have now started off as a group of gaming nerds in a basement making a game from a position of pure passion. For example, Gearbox Software, who is the creator of Borderlands, started as a small company with just 5 developers. No one was getting into the video game industry to get insanely wealthy. It was just groups of small teams working together because they wanted to create the best video games possible. The quality of products we received through this era was truly amazing. Titles like Half-Life, Borderlands, Fallout, and Elder Scrolls were released. Sure, these games weren't perfect, but you could tell that they had been crafted by a development team that cared about the end user's experience. The stories were written in a way to be engaging and make the player think when they turned the game off. This is something that is possible when you're working with a smaller team that has the opportunity to talk amongst each other and discuss ways to create a cohesive experience. The problem was that this golden era also proved to be insanely profitable for this handful of small companies. Some of them would be bought out by huge corporations, while others would become the huge corporations themselves. A lot of the magic that came from old titles was tied up in a small, super passionate team going above and beyond on the lore building, gameplay mechanics, tying things throughout the story back to the player. The larger the companies became, the much more formulaic the games became with it. This isn't really surprising. After all, most larger companies tend to lose their personal touch the larger they get. It is a lot harder to give any wiggle room to thousands of employees, so most major companies end up having super strict operating rules to make sure they get a consistent product. This consistency may be good for pumping out games with good graphics once a year, but it is severely lacking when it comes to creativity and innovation within the gaming space. When in smaller teams, it was possible to hear a dev's random idea and decide it was a worthwhile integration into the game. On modern development teams, following the roadmap is paramount to meeting timelines. Any suggested additions are usually going to be met with resistance due to time to develop. I don't blame developers directly for this. I'm sure they would prefer to craft things with passion in smaller studio conditions. However, these studios have become so massive that they can outcompete small studios on salaries, benefits, marketing dollars, media support, and company relations. These studios are just corporate behemoths now. The boardroom has become detached from the gaming experience overall. You really think that the ancient old men controlling Activision's boardroom care if people enjoy the new Call of Duty or not? As long as they can sell 25 million copies and print money, they don't care if the fans are happy. This attitude trickles down throughout the company, making it hard for developers to get truly invested into their product. They know the company is willing to release a broken game anyways, and it's not like any fun additions are going to get greenlit. Just continue hitting the copy-paste button and the game will eventually get done. Developers, when left to their own devices, are capable of producing amazing games. The amount of the major hits of the last decade made by indie developers prove that. There just isn't any wiggle room for them at these major studios. I do think game studios have gotten scared of taking risks too, but sometimes these risks are the things that make the biggest hits in gaming. Games have become much more expensive to produce, like a lot more expensive. It's thought GTA 6 might be one of the most expensive games to produce ever. Whenever a product becomes a lot more expensive to produce, you tend to see a drop in innovation. After all, these companies can't really afford to go to their investors and say they took a risk with the last game and ended up losing $100 million. Now that games have gotten expensive to develop, studios are much more comfortable picking a boring, easy to replicate game that doesn't really take many risks but still can sell copies to a wide audience. They are trying to make the Toyota Corolla of gaming rather than taking a risk to potentially make a Ferrari. These gaming companies have also built up an infrastructure and culture that doesn't necessarily care that much about gaming as a whole. Back in the golden days, every single person at the company had a passion for gaming in some regard. They were getting paid less than they could be to participate in an industry they loved. Now, these large studios have legal teams, marketing teams, finance teams, and upward management that might not necessarily be consumers of the product itself. The finance team doesn't care if the game releases are polished, and they don't care if fans are happy with the character changes. The only thing they care about is hitting their quarterly goals. The more infrastructure set up within a company that doesn't really have a connection to gaming, the more their products tend to drift away from what actual fans of the series want. They are listening to marketing research telling them that people love microtransactions and having to wait for months before the game actually gets patched the way it should have been on day one. They are so disconnected from the reality of the modern fan experience that they pump out stuff the boardroom thinks will be a hit, just for it to fall on deaf ears. Corporate culture usually comes with the effect of people not saying anything people don't want to hear. I think that is partly to blame for the amount of half-finished games that get released before they should. When things are going wrong, the managers are so worried about looking good to their boss and staying on schedule that they don't communicate that a launch at this state would be disastrous. I am personally tired of shelling out $80 just to have the game I bought be a half-polished turd. Another thing that has killed the gaming experience is just how over-monetized it seems like every title is nowadays. The base game is $80, you can buy in-game currency to purchase skins, then they are going to release DLC, then they are going to charge for a premium online mode monthly, and then the skins are slowly going to become pay to win, forcing you to add money or be destroyed. This is a pattern that has affected so many games that a lot of people just assume that most major titles are going to have a pay to win element to them. The truth is, from a business perspective, slamming microtransactions down the throats of your fans is a much more profitable model than making a good game. If even 5% of your players become addicted to the game and start dropping their entire paychecks into buying random crap, then you make out like a bandit. One person addicted to purchasing in-game currency will act as selling a new copy every week. It is a lot easier to maintain a game with 100,000 die-hard fans shelling out tons of cash than it is to actually support a game adored by millions. A lot of these companies also have to report to investors now. Once you go public on the stock market, you are tied to having a legal duty to produce as much money for shareholders as possible. This means that decisions that might not be profitable in the short term are almost universally unpopular with investors. Sometimes in the gaming space, you need to be able to allocate resources to exploring new technology or storyboarding potential IPs. Now that the largest players are publicly traded, a lot of their attention goes straight to making sure that the share prices go up. What is ironic about this is that they don't realize it is totally the opposite approach of what gave them their success. Let's be honest, games didn't get their popularity because they felt like a corporation trying to be personal. They got their popularity because they were expressions of creativity perfectly executed by passionate developers. Not developers who are being chained to a desk and forced to work 100 hours a week on the new microtransaction system to milk more money from your hardworking fans. Back in the day, it wasn't necessarily about guaranteeing a 40% profit margin or making sure your year-over-year sales were up 7%. It was about making a good game people wanted to buy. Sure, companies back then wanted to make money, but it wasn't as robotic and systematic as it is now. Companies were willing to go 3 years between releases to make sure that their next title was released perfectly. They were willing to spend extra time making sure all aspects of the story made sense. They were willing to spend time on the small details to make it a better experience for the player. Sure, it might not have been the most efficient use of company time, but at the end of the day, as long as the games were selling and the company was profitable, it was worth it for them to be proud of what they were releasing. It feels like no modern studios take any pride in what they release anymore. Instead, everything comes out half-baked. What is most unfortunate is that there are enough gaming fans that keep buying into the lie that things are going to change. The only way these game companies are ever going to reverse course and go back to actually caring about their game is if their bottom line gets affected. Nothing else matters to them. No matter how many videos about Bethesda falling apart get 1 million views, as long as they are printing money, they aren't going to change a thing. For some reason, there are tens of millions of gamers who continue to place pre-orders just to be disappointed with the final product. If the gaming community actually wants them to change their approach and go back to producing quality over quantity, it is going to take a vote with our wallets. I stopped pre-ordering games a while ago because I had become fed up with being sold a bill of lies only for it to be a mess when I actually played the game. I think there are lots of people who are similar to myself now. You wait for a game to be released and see how it actually is before deciding if you want to purchase or not. More people need to take that approach for this to change, because as long as the executive team is receiving fat bonuses, they are simply not going to care. Gaming is at a crossroads. It can either return to its root and become creative once more, or it can go the way of Hollywood, where every new product ends up feeling like a remake or copy of something done better originally. Both Hollywood and gaming are in the predicament of production becoming expensive, leading to safe plays with formulas that have been done a million times. Sure, on paper they are still making money, but they have lost a lot of their cultural impact and popularity they once had. There used to be a time I would be excited for every major AAA release, and at this point I expect the vast majority of any games that come out to be a dumpster fire of bugs and glitches. I think over monetization and formulaic development cycles is a majority of the reason that gaming sucks now. The major studios really just have no incentive to do more than the bare minimum because they are able to make so much money off their die-hard fans who will shell out money every week. This, combined with the expensive development cycles, forces companies to take less risks and go with repetitive types of games we've seen a million times. The corporate machine is going to just keep cruising along without any incentive to stop. That is just my honest breakdown of the situation the gaming industry finds itself in at this point. There really is only one way for us to break this cycle, and that is to stop spending our hard-earned money on their games. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button and comment down below if you agree that gaming sucks these days. If you like gaming videos like this, we post a similar video at least once a week. Last week we posted one about how Pokemon changed gaming forever. We are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year and would really appreciate it if you would help us with our goal. Thank you for watching.